In just 52 seconds, $47 million in missing Epstein evidence. Kash Patel didn't expect his own attorney general to stab him in the back. She did it anyway. Cameras captured everything. Congress gasped. What did Pam Bondi reveal that made the FBI director's face drain of color and his hands start trembling uncontrollably? At exactly 9:07 a.m. on February 15, 2025, the mahogany walls of the House Judiciary Committee chamber echoed with nervous tension. FBI Director Kash Patel walked in like an investigator who had seen too many lies, his jaw clenched tight, carrying a stack of declassified memos that would either save his career or destroy it completely. Behind him, congressional subpoenas rustled in his aide's briefcase, like weapons waiting to be drawn. Patel had spent the previous 72 hours in crisis mode, fielding calls from the White House, briefing Republican leadership, and coordinating with Attorney General Pam Bondi on what they called Operation Clean Slate, their strategy to neutralize the Epstein file controversy before it could torpedo the administration. The plan was simple: controlled release, strategic redactions, and unified messaging. What Patel didn't know was that Bondi had already decided to sacrifice him. The committee room buzzed with reporters whose notebooks remained ominously empty, waiting to fill them with whatever explosion was about to happen. Representative General Moscowitz sat like a prosecutor who had already seen the verdict, his legal pad covered in timestamps and dollar amounts that would soon make headlines worldwide. Across the aisle, Republican members fidgeted with their American flag pins, their briefing folders marked confidential in bold red letters. The chair recognizes the ranking member, announced Chairman Jim Jordan, his voice cutting through the chamber like a gavel. But before Moscowitz could speak, his phone buzzed with a breaking news alert that made his eyes widen. The Wall Street Journal had just published Attorney General Pam Bondi's exclusive interview, and it contradicted everything Patel had told Congress the week before. 47 seconds passed in complete silence. As Moscowitz scrolled through the article on his phone, the chamber froze. Even the cameras stopped their mechanical whirring. Reporters leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. Patel's knuckles went white as he gripped his prepared statement, suddenly realizing that the ground beneath his feet was about to disappear. Mr. Director, Moscowitz began, his voice calm but loaded with deadly precision. Before we start today's hearing, I need to ask you about something your boss just told the Wall Street Journal. Exactly, he checked his watch. 12 minutes ago. Patel's face drained of color. His aide leaned forward to whisper something, but Patel waved him off with a trembling hand. He had no idea what Bondi had said, but from Moskowitz's tone, it wasn't good. The FBI director's rapid questions and legal jargon suddenly felt useless. His sharp glances around the room revealed nothing but hostile faces waiting for his response. The Attorney General just confirmed that the Epstein client list does exist, sits on her desk, and contains shocking revelations about powerful people. Moscowitz continued, his words falling like hammer blows. Yet last week, you testified under oath that no such comprehensive list existed. Which one of you is lying to Congress? The room erupted. Gasps rippled through the chamber like a physical wave. Republican members frantically texted their staff, trying to get clarification from Bondi's office. Democratic members exchanged knowing looks. They had been waiting for this moment for months. The press gallery exploded into motion, fingers flying across keyboards as breaking news alerts began pinging across Washington. Patel's evolution from calm to aggressive to desperate was visible to everyone in the room. His evolution from composed FBI director to cornered bureaucrat happened in real time, broadcast live on C-SPAN and streaming across social media platforms where Patel panic was already trending. Congressman Moscowitz, Patel stammered, his voice cracking slightly. I was referring to the FBI's specific holdings, not the Department of Justice. Stop right there, Moskowitz interrupted, holding up his hand. Don't make this worse. Your own Attorney General just threw you under the bus on national television. She said the FBI has been less than forthcoming about Epstein evidence. Those are her words, not mine. The silence that followed was like a tomb. 4 seconds ticked by. The cameras zoomed in on Patel's face, capturing every bead of sweat forming on his forehead. His aide frantically scribbled notes, but there was no good spin for this betrayal. Patel had been hung out to dry by his own attorney general, and everyone in the room knew it. Within 3 minutes of Moskowitz's revelation, Twitter exploded with clips of Patel's reaction. Bondi betrayal started trending alongside Epstein files and Patel panic. Fox News cut away from regular programming to discuss the bombshell development. CNN broke into their morning show with breaking FBI Director contradicted by Attorney General on Epstein files. But the real earthquake was happening behind the scenes. In Bondi's Justice Department office, her communications director was fielding angry calls from the White House. The president had specifically ordered unity on the Epstein issue, and now, his own attorney general had created a massive rift with his FBI director. Sources close to the administration would later describe the president as furious and feeling betrayed by Bondi's rogue interview. The truth was even more damaging than the public realized. Bondi's betrayal wasn't accidental, it was calculated. 3 days earlier, she had received a classified briefing about Ghislaine Maxwell's prison transfer and the $47 million in missing Epstein-related assets that the FBI had failed to properly track. Instead of confronting Patel privately, she decided to use the information as leverage to distance herself from what she saw as an inevitable scandal. Let me read you exactly what Attorney General Bondi told the Wall Street Journal this morning, Moskowitz continued, pulling out a printed copy of the article. The FBI's handling of Epstein-related evidence has been characterized by institutional reluctance to pursue obvious leads. Director Patel's assurances to Congress appear to have been overly optimistic about our investigative completeness. The words hit Patel like physical blows. His own boss hadn't just contradicted him. She had questioned his competence and integrity in the nation's most prominent newspaper. The carefully orchestrated strategy they had developed together had been shredded by Bondi's ambition to save her own reputation at his expense. Republican members looked stricken. They had defended Patel's testimony just days earlier, insisting that the FBI was cooperating fully with congressional oversight. Now they looked like either dupes or conspirators, neither of which was a good look with midterm elections approaching. Several began frantically checking their phones for guidance from leadership about how to respond to this devastating development. Mr. Director, Moskowitz pressed, were you aware that Attorney General Bondi was going to contradict your sworn testimony to this committee when she sat down with the Wall Street Journal yesterday? No, Congressman. I was not briefed on that interview, Patel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The admission sent another shockwave through the room. Here was the FBI director, publicly acknowledging that his own attorney general had blindsided him with contradictory statements to the press. The damage was immediate and irreversible. Within minutes, every major news outlet was running with variations of FBI director blindsided by attorney general, and Bondi contradicts Patel on Epstein files. The story had everything political reporters loved: betrayal, scandal, and high-ranking officials in conflict during a major controversy. But Moskowitz wasn't finished. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and Bondi's betrayal had given him the perfect opening to expose the deeper problems with the administration's handling of the Epstein matter. Mr. Director, since you apparently weren't consulted before the Attorney General decided to throw you under the bus, let me ask you directly, how do you explain the $47 million in Epstein-related assets that have gone missing from FBI custody? The question landed like a bomb. Patel's mouth opened and closed silently as he searched for an answer that wouldn't further incriminate him. His aide frantically shuffled through briefing papers, but there was no good explanation for missing evidence in the nation's most high-profile case. The assets in question are part of an ongoing forfeiture proceeding that involves multiple agencies and— Mr. Director, Moskowitz interrupted again. Yes or no? Are you telling this committee that $47 million in evidence related with Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise is currently unaccounted for? The silence stretched like a chasm. Every person in the room understood that Patel was facing a career-ending moment. If he admitted the money was missing, he'd be accused of incompetence, or worse. If he denied it, he'd be contradicting financial records that Moskowitz clearly had access to. Congressman, the FBI takes its custody responsibilities very seriously, and we are working with the Treasury Department to reconcile certain discrepancies in asset tracking that may have occurred during the transition between. That's a yes, Moscowitz declared flatly. Thank you for confirming that the FBI has lost track of $47 million in Epstein evidence, while simultaneously telling Congress that your investigation was thorough and complete. The Republican ranking member finally tried to intervene. Mr. Chairman, I think we need to allow the director to provide full context for these. The context, Moscowitz shot back, is that the Attorney General just publicly admitted that the FBI director misled Congress, and now we're learning that they've also lost track of nearly $50 million in evidence. How much more context do we need? The room buzzed with whispered conversations as reporters filed urgent updates. This wasn't just a political embarrassment. It was a potential criminal matter. Lying to Congress was a felony, and missing evidence in a high-profile case suggested either incompetence or corruption at the highest levels of federal law enforcement. Patel's hands trembled as he reached for his water glass. The FBI badge on his desk suddenly felt like a target, rather than a symbol of authority. His prepared statement about ongoing cooperation and institutional integrity now seemed laughably inadequate, given the magnitude of what was unfolding. The real tragedy, as Moscowitz would point out in his closing statement, wasn't just the bureaucratic chaos or the political embarrassment, it was the impact on survivors of Epstein's abuse, who had been promised justice and accountability only to watch their cases become political footballs in a game of institutional self-preservation. These aren't just files or political talking points, Moscowitz said, his voice heavy with genuine emotion. These are testimonies from people whose lives were destroyed by Jeffrey Epstein and his enablers. Every day that evidence goes missing, every time officials contradict each other in the press, every moment of bureaucratic chaos is another betrayal of those survivors. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Patel looked down at his hands, perhaps realizing for the first time that his career ambitions had cost him something more valuable: his integrity. The man who had once positioned himself as a reformer, someone who would clean up the FBI and restore public trust, was now just another official caught in a web of contradictions and missing evidence. As the hearing broke for recess, reporters rushed to file their stories while Patel's aide whispered urgently in his ear about damage control strategies, but the damage was already done. Pam Bondi's calculated betrayal had exposed not just the dysfunction between agencies, but the willingness of officials to sacrifice each other rather than confront the deeper problems in their handling of the Epstein matter. The story would dominate news cycles for weeks, but its real impact would be measured in the further erosion of public trust in institutions that had already been severely damaged by years of political scandal and bureaucratic failure. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't a badge or a subpoena, it's truth, archived and revealed at exactly the right second to maximum effect. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within 6 minutes of the hearing's explosive exchange, Patel's chief of staff was fielding calls from White House lawyers demanding an immediate explanation. The president's inner circle, already nervous about Epstein-related controversies, watched in horror as their carefully constructed narrative collapsed in real time on national television. "Sir," Patel's aide whispered urgently as cameras continued rolling, "Twitter is exploding. Bondi betrayal has 500,000 tweets in the last hour." The aide's tablet showed a cascade of viral clips, memes, and news alerts spreading across every platform. Political operatives on both sides were already crafting statements, sensing an opportunity to either defend or attack the crumbling FBI director. But the most damaging revelation was yet to come. As Moscowitz prepared his next question, his staff handed him a folder marked "Classified Eyes Only." Inside were bank transfer records, showing that the missing $47 million hadn't just disappeared, it had been systematically moved through a network of shell companies, with ties to Maxwell's legal defense fund. "Mr. Director," Moscowitz continued, his voice now deadly quiet, "I'm looking at Treasury Department records that show the missing Epstein assets weren't lost. They were transferred. Specifically, $23.7 million was moved to accounts controlled by law firms representing Ghislaine Maxwell. Did you authorize these transfers?" Patel's face went ashen. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The FBI director, who had built his reputation on aggressive prosecution, was now speechless, trapped between admitting to either gross negligence or potential obstruction of justice. His hands shook visibly as he reached for documents that couldn't possibly contain an answer to this devastating question. The chamber erupted again. Republican members who had been defending Patel just minutes earlier began distancing themselves, some literally pushing back from the witness table. Democratic members leaned forward like sharks sensing blood, already planning follow-up hearings and subpoenas that would keep this scandal alive through the election cycle. Those transfers would have required Treasury approval. And, Patel stammered, but Moscowitz cut him off with surgical precision. Yes or no, Director Patel? Did you know that money intended as evidence in criminal proceedings was being used to pay the legal fees of a convicted child trafficker? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Every reporter in the room understood they were witnessing a career-ending moment broadcast live to millions of viewers. C-SPAN's call-in lines jammed as outraged citizens demanded answers. Cable news networks cleared their schedules to provide wall-to-wall coverage of what pundits were already calling the most explosive congressional hearing since Watergate. In her Justice Department office, Pam Bondi watched the coverage with satisfaction tinged by concern. Her calculated betrayal of Patel was working exactly as planned. She had successfully distanced herself from the FBI's failures, while positioning herself as the responsible adult demanding accountability. But as her communications director briefed her on the escalating media frenzy, she began to wonder if she had unleashed forces beyond her control. "Ma'am," her aide reported nervously, "the White House is asking if you plan any more surprise interviews. They're not happy about the coordination breakdown." The understatement masked the fury emanating from the Oval Office, where the president was reportedly throwing a legendary tantrum about his own officials undermining each other in public. As the hearing continued, each new revelation made Patel's position more untenable. Moscowitz methodically destroyed every aspect of the FBI director's credibility, from the missing money, to the contradictory statements, to the apparent coordination with Maxwell's defense team. Social media exploded with calls for Patel's immediate resignation, while legal experts debated whether his testimony constituted perjury. The human cost of this bureaucratic chaos wasn't lost on the survivors watching from home. Sarah Ransom, a prominent Epstein victim, tweeted, "Watching officials fight over who lied about our evidence, while our abusers remain protected. This is why victims don't trust the system." Her message was retweeted 200,000 times in 2 hours, crystallizing public anger about the political gamesmanship surrounding serious crimes. By the time Chairman Jordan called for recess, the damage was complete and irreversible. Kash Patel had entered the hearing as FBI director and would likely leave as the former FBI director. Pam Bondi's betrayal had achieved its intended goal of self-preservation, but at the cost of institutional credibility that would take years to rebuild. Most importantly, the victims of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes remained without justice, their cases reduced to political ammunition in Washington's endless war for survival and advantage. This dramatized story is inspired by real events and public figures. All dialogue and incidents are fictionalized for commentary and educational purposes. This is not intended to defame, but to explore themes of power, truth, and accountability in government institutions.